I'm not ready. Now I'm ready. Hey, what's up? It's been a hot second. Should I turn on my light? Hey. Okay. Hey. Oh no. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Hi, my room's not pink anymore. That's why I haven't been here in a month. Anyways, let's go on. We're back. And we're reading it. And we're at the gross chapter. I already feel like I'm gonna throw up and we haven't even read it yet. I'm so excited. I'm so pumped. This is gonna be great. I'm glad we get to experience this together. Me sitting here alone in my room, you watching me. So, I got my jelly beans. I'm ready to rock and roll. Or coaster. I also have some water. I have 3 drinks here. Got some water, I got some apple juice, and I have, oh, it's gone. Okay. Let's do this thing. Oh, I just put, hold on a second. I have jelly beans in my mouth. So you have approximately 37 pages to read. That looks of it. Yeah. Alrighty, we can do that. Let's do it. Why did I just... Sorry, I'm trying to mark when we're stopping and when we're starting next time. Okay, now I'm ready. 2 minutes in, I'm ready now. Okay. If you forgot where we left off, that's okay. I did too. We're on chapter 11, the walking tours. This is when they all split up across Derry, and in chapter 2 in the movie, it's when they're looking for their tokens, but they're not looking for tokens now, they're just looking for memories. So, yeah. We're on Beverly's part. Page 569 in the paperback 2017 movie version. Also, huge trigger warnings for gross sexual content. Yeah. Okay. Part 3. Bev Rogan pays a call. Beverly walked absently down Main Street from the Derry townhouse, where she had gone to change to a pair of blue jeans and a bright yellow smock blouse. She was not thinking about where she was going. Instead, she thought this. Your hair was winter fire, January embers. My heart burns there too. She had that hidden in her bottom drawer beneath her underwear. Her mother might have seen it, but that was all right. The important thing was that was one drawer her father never looked in. If he had seen it, he might have looked at her with that bright, almost friendly and utterly paralyzing stare of his, and asked in his almost friendly way, "You been doing something you shouldn't be doing, Bev? You been doing something with some boy?" And if she said yes, or if she had said no, there would be a quick wham-bam, so quick, so hard, it didn't even hurt at first. It took a few seconds for the vacuum to dissipate and the pain to fill the place where the vacuum had been. And then once again, his voice, almost friendly. I worry a lot about you, Beverly. I worry an awful lot. You got to grow up, isn't that so? Her father might still be living here in Derry. He had been living here the last time she had heard from him, but that had been, how long ago? 10 years? Long before she had married Tom, anyway. She'd gotten a postcard from him, not a plain postcard like the one the poem had been written on, but one showing the hideous plastic statue of Paul Bunyan, which stood in front of city center. So, the January Embers postcard didn't have the standpipe on it. I'm looking at my one I have put on my wall. It was just a plain postcard. That's disappointing. The statue had been erected sometime in the 50s and had been one of the landmarks of her childhood, but her father's card had called up no nostalgia or memories for her. It might as well have been a card showing Gateway Arch in St. Louis or the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Hope you are doing well and being good, the card read. Hope you will send me something if you can, as I don't have much. I love you, Bevy. Dad. He had loved her. In some ways, she supposed that had everything to do with why she had fallen so desperately in love with Bill Denbrough that summer of 1958. Because of all the boys, Bill was the one who projected the sense of authority she associated with her father. That's what I've been saying. The reason that she loves Bill in chapter 1 and then Ben once they've defeated Pennywise is because Bill reminds her of her father. She's always stuck in these abusive relationships where she's left with this really assertive man, and Bill is that figure for her. But after they defeat Pennywise, she understands that she doesn't have to have that anymore, and so she can have Ben. Okay, anyways. Yes, it's there. I'm highlighting that. Page 570. We're already getting the highlighter out. Because of all the boys, Bill was the one who projected the sense of authority she associated with her father. But it was a different sense of authority. Oh, never mind. Somehow, it was authority that listened. She saw no assumption in either his eyes or his actions that he believed her father's kind of worrying to be the only reason authority needed to exist. As if people were pets, to be cosseted? Cosseted? C-O-S-S-E-T-E-D. And disciplined. Whatever the reasons, by the end of their first meeting as a complete group in July of that year, the meeting of which Bill had taken such complete and effortless charge, she had been madly, head over heels in love with him. Calling it a simple schoolgirl crush was saying a Rolls Royce was a vehicle with 4 wheels, something like a hay wagon. She did not giggle wildly and blush when she saw him, nor did she chalk his name on trees or write in the walls of the kissing bridge. She simply lived with his face in her heart all the time, a kind of sweet, hurtful ache. She would have died for him. So what do I do? It was natural enough, she supposed, for her to want to believe it had been Bill who sent her the love poem, although she had never gone so far as to actually convince herself it was so. No, she had known who wrote the poem, or later on at some point hadn't its author admitted this to her? Yes, Ben told her so, although she could not now remember, not for the life of her, just when or under what circumstances he actually said it aloud. And although his love for her had been almost as well hidden as the love she had felt for Bill, but you told him, Bevy, you told him you loved. It was obvious to anyone who really looked, and he was kind. It was in the way he was always careful to keep some space between them, in the draw of his breath when she touched his arm or his hand, in the way he dressed when he knew he was going to see her. Dear, sweet fat Ben. It had ended somehow, that difficult pre-adolescent triangle, but just how it had ended was one of the things she still couldn't remember. She thought that Ben had confessed authoring and sending the little love poem. She thought she had told Bill she loved him, that she would love him forever, and somehow those two tellings had helped save all of their lives, or had they? She couldn't remember. These memories, or memories of memories that was really closer to what they were like islands that were not really islands at all, but only knobs of a single coral spine which happened to poke above the waterline, not separate at all, but one piece. Yet whenever she tried to dive deep and see the rest, a maddening image intervened. The grackles which came back each spring to New England, crowding the telephone lines, trees, and rooftops, jostling for places, and filling the thawing late March air with their raucous gossip. That's a really cool assonance. Raucous gossip. This image came to her again and again, foreign and disturbing, like a heavy radio beam that blankets the signal you really want to pick up. She realized with sudden shock that she was standing outside of the Clean Claws washateria, where she and Stan Uris and Ben and Eddie had taken the rags that day in late June, rags stained with blood, which they could only see. The windows were now soaped opaque, and there was a hand-lettered "For Sale by Owner" sign taped to the door. Peering between the swashes of soap, she could see an empty room with lighter squares on the dirty yellow walls where the washers had stood. I'm going home, she thought dismally, but walked on anyway. I don't have my Funko Pops up here anymore. They're in the basement. Not like stored away. We have a little media room in the basement. But I can't hold on to Stanley now. Let's go get him every Saturday. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. A few more of the trees were gone, probably almost felled by disease. The houses looked a little tackier. Broken windows seemed slightly more common than they had been when she was a girl. Some of the broken panes had been replaced with cardboard, some hadn't. And here she stood in front of the apartment house, 127 Lower Main Street, still here. The peeling white she remembered had become a peeling chocolate brown at some point during the years between. 127. 27. Like the number. But it was still unmistakable. There was a window which looked in on what had been their kitchen. There was a window of her bedroom. Jim Doyle, you come out of that road. Come out right now. You want to get run over and killed? She shivered, hugged her arms, and crossed her breasts in an X, cupping her elbows and her arms. Oh, wait. She shivered, hugging her arms across her breasts in an X, cupping her elbows in each each in her palms. Daddy could still be living here. Oh, yes, he could. He couldn't move unless he had to. He wouldn't move unless he had to. Just walk on up there, Beverly. Look at the mailboxes. 3 boxes for 3 apartments, just like in the old days. And if there's one which says Marsh, you can ring the bell, and pretty soon there'll be a shuffle of slippers down the hall, and the door will open, and you can look at him. The man whose sperm made you red-headed and left-handed and gave you the ability to draw. Remember how he used to draw? He could draw anything he wanted. If he felt like it, that is. He didn't feel like it often. I guess he had too many things to worry about. But when he did, he used to sit for hours and watch him draw cats, and watch while he drew cats and dogs and horses and cows with moo coming out of their mouths and balloons. You'd laugh and he'd laugh, and then he'd say, "Now you, Bevy." And when you held the pen, he'd guide your hand, and you'd see the cat or the cow or the cat or the smiling man unspooling beneath your own fingers, while you smelled his mean and skin bracer in the warmth of his skin. Go on up, Beverly, ring the bell. He'll come and he'll be old. The lines will be drawn deep in his face and his teeth, those that are left. Oh. Lines will be drawn deep in his face, and his teeth, those that are left, will be yellow. And he'll look at you and he'll say, "Why, it's Bevy. Bevy's come home to see her old dad. Come on in, Bevy. I'm so glad to see you. I'm glad because I worry about you, Bevy. I worry a lot." She walked slowly up the path, but in the weeds growing up between the cracked concrete sections brushed out at the legs of her jeans. She looked closely at the first floor windows, but they were curtained off. She looked at the mailboxes. 3rd floor Starkweather, 2nd floor Burke, 1st floor, her breath caught, Marsh. But I won't ring. I don't want to see him. I won't ring the bell. This was a firm decision at last, the decision that opened the gate to a full and useful lifetime to firm decisions. She walked down the path, backed uptown, up to the dairy townhouse, packed, cabbed, flew, told Tom to bug out, lived successfully, died happily. Rang the bell. She heard the familiar chimes from the living room. Chimes that had always sounded to her like a Chinese name. Ching chong. Ooh, wow. Thanks, Stephen. Silence. No answer. She shifted on the porch. I feel like I'm really, bright right now. Should I turn off the lamp? I'm going to turn down the brightness of my laptop so I don't have to look at myself anymore. She shifted on the porch from one foot to the other, suddenly needing to pee. No one home, she thought, relieved. I can go now. Instead, she rang again. Ching chong. No answer. She thought of Ben's lovely little poem and tried to remember exactly when and how he had confessed its authorship, and why for a brief second it called up an association with having her first menstrual period. Had she begun menstruating at 11? Surely not, although her breaths had begun their first achy growth around midwinter. Why? Then intervening, a mental picture of thousands of grackles on phone lines and rooftops all babbling at the white spring sky. I'll leave now. I've rung twice. That's enough. But she rang again. Ching chong. Now she heard someone approaching, and the sound was just as she had imagined. The tired whisper of old slippers. She looked around wildly and came very, very close to just taking to her heels. Could she make it down the cement walk and around the corner, leaving her father to think it had been nothing but kids playing pranks? Hey, mister, you got Prince Albert in a can? She let out a sudden, sharp breath and had to tighten her throat because what wanted to come out was a laugh of relief. It wasn't her father at all. Standing in the doorway and looking out at her was a tall woman in her late 70s. Her hair was long and gorgeous, mostly white, but shot through with loads. L-O-D-E-S. Loads? I don't know. Of purest gold. Behind her rimless spectacles were eyes as blue as the water in the Fjords her ancestors had perhaps hailed from. She wore a purple dress of watered silk. It was shabby, but still dignified. Her wrinkled face was kind. Yes, miss? I'm sorry, Beverly said. The urge to laugh had passed as swiftly as it had come. She noticed the old woman wore a cameo at her throat. Cameo. I don't know what that is. It was almost certainly real ivory, surrounded by a band of gold so thin it was nearly invisible. I must have rung the wrong bell. Or rang the wrong bell on purpose, Ryan whispered. I meant to ring for Marsh. Marsh? Her forehead wrinkled delicately. Yes, you see, there's no marsh here, the old woman said. But unless you don't mean Alvin Marsh, do you? Yes, Beverly said, my father. The old woman's hand rose to the cameo and touched it. She peered more closely at Beverly, making her feel ridiculously young, as if she should perhaps have a box of Girl Scout cookies in her hands, or maybe some tags. Support the Derry High School Tigers. Then the old woman smiled, a kind smile that was nonetheless sad. Why, you have fallen out of touch, miss. I don't want to be the one who tells you this, a stranger, but your father has been dead these last 5 years. But on the bell, she looked again and uttered a small, bewildered sound that was not quite a laugh. In her agitation, her subconscious but rock-solid certainty that her old man would still be here, she read Kirsch as Marsh. You're Mrs. Kirsch? She asked. She was staggered by this news of her father, but she also felt stupid about the mistake. The lady would think her little more than illiterate. Mrs. Kirsch, she agreed. Did you know my dad? Very little did I know him, Mrs. Kirsch said. She sounded a little like Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back, and Beverly felt like laughing again. When had her emotions gone whipsawing so violently back and forth? The truth, she couldn't remember her time, but she was dismally afraid she would before much longer. He went to the ground floor apartment before me. We saw each other, me coming and him going, over a space of days. He moved down to Roward Lane. Do you know it? Yes, Beverly said. Roward Lane branched off from Lower Main Street 4 blocks farther down, where the apartment buildings were smaller and even more desperately shabby. I'm not doing too well at this. My eyes hurt. I haven't done this in a while. I used to see him at the Costello Avenue Market sometimes, Mrs. Kirsch said, and at the Washateria before they closed it. We passed a word from time to time. Girl, you're pale. I'm sorry. Come in and let me give you tea. No, I couldn't, Beverly said weakly. But in fact, she actually felt pale, like clouded glass that you could nearly look through. She felt she could use tea in a chair in which to sit and drink it. You could and you will, Mrs. Kirsch said warmly. It's the least I can do for having told you such unpleasant news. Before she could protest, Beverly found herself being led up the gloomy hall into her old apartment, which now seems much smaller but safe enough. Safe, she supposed, because almost everything was different. Instead of the pink-topped formica table with its 3 chairs, there was a small round table, really not much bigger than an end table, with silk flowers in a pottery vase. Oh no, I yawned. Oh no. Instead of the old Calvinator refrigerator with the round drum on top, her father tinkered with it constantly to keep it going, there was a copper-colored Frigidaire. The stove was small but efficient looking. There was an Amana radar range above it. Bright blue curtains hung in the windows, and she could see flower boxes outside of them. The floor, linoleum when she was a girl here, had been stripped to its original wood. Many applications of oil made it glow mellowly. Mrs. Kirsch looked around from the stove, where she was placing a teapot. You grew up here? Yes, Beverly said. But it's different now. So trim and tidy. Wonderful. How kind you are, Mrs. Kirsch said, and her smile made her younger. It was radiant. I have a little money, you see. Not much, but with my Social Security, I'm comfortable. Once I was a girl in Sweden. I came to this country in 1920, a girl of 14 with no money, which is the best way to learn the value of money. Would you agree? Yes, Bev said. At the hospital I worked, Mrs. Kirsch said. Many years, from 1925 I worked there. I rose to the position of head housekeeper. All the keys I had, my husband invested our money quite well. Now I have reached a little harbor. Look around, miss, while the water boils. No, I couldn't. Please, still, I feel guilty. Look if you like. And so she did look. Her parents' bedroom was now Mrs. Kirsch's bedroom, and the difference was profound. The room seemed brighter and airier now. A large cedar chest, the initials R.G. inlaid into it. R.G. I feel stupid. Robert Gray. R.G. Robert Gray. Mrs. Kirsch. No way. Robert Gray. That's Pennywise. His real name, or not his real name, but his real person name. His real name is Pennywise. His real name is It. I call him It. I'm talking about the being of Pennywise. Anyways. A gigantic surprise quilt. Surprise quilt. Aw. Surprise! It's a quilt. I need to go to bed. A gigantic surprise quilt lay on the bed. On it she could see women drawing water, boys driving cattle, men building haystacks. A wonderful quilt. Her room had become a sewing room. A black Singer machine stood on a wrought iron table under a pair of starkly efficient tensor lamps. Oh no! A picture of Jesus hung on one wall, a picture of John F. Kennedy on another. Love that contrast. A beautiful brick front stood below the picture of JFK. It was filled with books instead of china, but seemed none the worse for that. She went into the bathroom last. It had been redone into a rose color, if that was too low and pleasant to seem gaudy. All of the fixtures were new, and yet she approached the basin feeling that old nightmare that had gripped her again. She would peer down into the black and lidless eye, the whispering would begin, and then the blood. She leaned over the sink, catching a glimpse of her pallid face and dark eyes in the mirror over the basin. I feel like my eyes hurt. And then she stared into the eye, waiting for the voices, the laughter, the groans, the blood. How long might she have stood there, bent over the sink, waiting for the sights and sounds 27 years gone? She didn't know. It was Mrs. Kirsch's voice that bid her return. "Tea, miss!" She jerked back, a semi-hypnosis broken, and left the bathroom. If there had been a dark magic somewhere down the drain, it was gone now, or was sleeping. Oh, you shouldn't have. Mrs. Kirsch looked up at her brightly, smiling a little. Oh, miss, if you knew how seldom company calls these days, you'd not say so. Why, I put on more than this for the man at the Bangor Hydro who comes to read my meter. I'm making him fat. Delicate cups and saucers stood on the round kitchen table, a clean bone white edged with blue. There was a plate of small cakes and cookies. Beside the sweets, a pewter teapot chuffed, mild steam and pleasant fragrance. Bemused, Bev thought the only things missing were the tiny sandwiches with the crust cut off. Aunt sandwiches, she thought them, always one word. Aunt sandwiches. 3 main types of aunt sandwiches: cream cheese and olive, watercress, and egg salad. Sit down, said Mrs. Kirsch. Sit down, miss, and I'll pour out. I'm not a miss, Beverly said, and raised her left hand so that her ring would show. I thought she took her ring off. Oh, no, that happened in the movie. I guess she didn't take it off in this one. Mrs. Kirsch smiled and pushed a hand through the air. Psh, Jester had said. I call all the pretty young girls miss, she said. Just a habit. Don't take offense. No, Beverly said, not at all. But for some reason she felt a feather touch of unease. There was something in the old woman's smile that seemed a little, unpleasant, false, knowing? But that was ridiculous, wasn't it? I love what you've done to the place. Do you? Mrs. Kirsch said, and poured out. The tea looked dark, muddy. Beverly wasn't sure she wanted to drink it, and suddenly she wasn't sure she wanted to be here at all. It did say Marshall at the doorbell, her mind whispered suddenly, and she was frightened. Mrs. Kirsch passed her tea. Thank you, Beverly said. The look of it might have been muddy. The aroma, however, was wonderful. She tasted. It was fine. Stop jumping at shadows, she told herself. That cedar chest in particular is a wonderful piece. An antique, that one, Mrs. Kirsch said and laughed. Beverly noticed that the old woman's beauty was flawed on only one score, and that was common enough here in the Northlands. Her teeth were very bad, strong-looking, but bad all the same. They were yellow, and the front two had crossed each other. The canines seemed very long, almost like tusks. They were white when she came to the door. She smiled, and you thought to herself how white they were. Suddenly she was not just a little frightened. Suddenly she needed to be away from here. Very old. Oh, yes, Mrs. Kirsch exclaimed. Did I skip something? Nope. And drank her cup of tea off at a single gulp with a sudden shocking slurping sound. She smiled at Beverly, grinned at her, and Beverly saw that the woman's eyes had changed too. The corneas were now yellow, ancient, threaded with blurry stitches of red. Her hair was thinner, the braid looked malnourished, no longer silver shot with bright yellow, but a dull gray. Very old, Mrs. Kirsch reminisced over her empty cup, looking slyly at Beverly from her yellowed eyes. Her snaggle teeth showed in that repulsive, almost leering grin. From home with me it came. The RG carved into it, you noticed? Yes. Her voice came from far away, and a part of her brain yammered, if she doesn't know you've seen the change, perhaps you're still all right. She doesn't see. My fodder, she said, pronouncing it fodder. And Beverly saw that her dress had also changed. It had become a scabrous, peeling black. The cameo was a skull, its jaw hanged in a diseased gape. His name was Robert Gray, better known as Bob Gray, better known as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. Although that was not his name either, but he did love his joke, my fodder. She laughed again. Some of her teeth had turned black as her dress. The wrinkles in her skin now cut deep. Her milk rose skin had gone a sickly yellow. Her fingers were claws. She grinned at Beverly. Have something to eat, dear. Her voice had risen half an octave, but the octave was cracked. Oh, sorry. It was cracked into register. Have something to eat, dear. I don't know. And her voice was the sound of a crypt door swinging mindlessly on hinges clogged with black earth. Have something to eat, dear. No, thank you, Beverly heard her mouth say in a child's high, I must be going voice. No, thank you. The words did not seem to originate in her brain. Rather, they came out of her mouth and then had to travel around to her ears before she was aware of what she had said. No, the witch said and grinned. Her claws scabbled on the plate, and she began to cram thin molasses cookies and delicate frosted slices of cake into her mouth with both hands. Her horrid teeth plunged and reared. Her fingernails, long and dirty, dug into the sweets. Crumbs tumbled down the bony slab of her chin. Her breath with the smell of long dead things burst wide open by the gases of their own decay. Her laugh was now a dead cackle. Her hair was thinner. Scaly scalp showed in patches. Oh, he loved his joke, my fodder. This is a joke, miss, if you enjoy them. My fodder bore me rather than my mudder. He shot me from his asshole. Hee hee hee. Let's laugh. Hee hee hee. Because she's a witch. Get it? Hee hee hee. I ought to go. That was British. I had to go, Beverly. I said it again. I ought to go. It's ought. It's not, no one says ought here in the America. Beverly heard herself say in that same high, wounded voice, the voice of a small girl who had been viciously embarrassed at her first party. There was no strength in her legs. She was dimly aware that it was not tea in her cup, but shit, liquid shit, a little party favor from the sewers under the city. She had drank some of that. Not much, but a sip. Oh, oh, blessed Jesus, please, please. The woman was shrinking before her eyes, thinning. It was now Crone with an apple doll's face who sat across from her, giggling in a high, squealing voice and rocking back and forth. Oh, my father and I are one, she said. Just me, just him, and dear, if you are wise, you will run back to where you came from, run quickly, because to stay will mean worse than your death. No one who dies in Derry ever really dies. That's not what it says, that's not what it says in the movie. No one who dies in Derry really dies. You knew that before, believe it now. In slow motion, Beverly gathered her legs under her. As if from outside, she saw herself gaining her feet and walking back. As if from outside, she saw herself gaining her feet and backing away from the table, and from which the woman in an agony of horror and disbelief because she realized for the first time that the neat little dining room table was not dark oak but fudge. Even as she watched, the witch, still giggling, her ancient yellow eyes slanted slyly off into the corner of the room, broke a piece off of it, and stuffed it avidly into the black ringed trap that was her mouth. The cups she saw were white bark that had been carefully looped with blue-dyed frosting. The pictures of Jesus and John Kennedy were creations of nearly transparent spun sugar, and she looked at them, and as she looked at them, Jesus stuck out his tongue, and Kennedy dropped a stinky wink. We're all waiting for you, the witch screamed, and her fingernails scrabbled over the surface of the fudge table, drawing deep scars on its shining surface. Oh, yes, oh, yes! The overhead lights were globes of hard candy. The wainscoting was caramel taffy. She looked down and saw that her shoes were leaving prints in the floorboards, which were not boards at all, but slices of chocolate. The smell of candy was cloying. Oh God, it's Hansel and Gretel. It's the witch, the one that always scared me. The worst because she ate the children. You and your friends, the witch screamed, laughing. You and your friends in the cage until the oven's hot. She screamed with laughter. Give me a second. Wait. She screamed laughter and Beverly ran from the door, but she ran as if in slow motion. You and your friends in the cage until the oven's hot. We're going to scare you until you're ready to be eaten. Okay, anyways. The witch's laughter beat and swirled around her head, a cloud of bats. Beverly shrieked. The hall stank of sugar and nougat and toffee and sickening synthetic strawberries. The doorknob mock crystal when she came was now a monstrous sugar diamond. The next few parts, I am going to have a lot. I'm going to say what the word is, what the first letter of the word is. This is the icky part, because I don't feel comfortable saying that, especially not on the internet. So I'll just say the first letter of the word. Use your imagination to figure out what it is. I worry about you, Bevy. I worry a lot. She turned, swirls of red hair floating around her face, to see her father staggering toward her down the hallway, wearing the witch's black dress and skull cameo. Her father's face hung with doughy, running flesh, his eyes as black as obsidian, his hands clenching and unclenching, his mouth grinning with soupy fervor. I beat you because I wanted to fuck you, Bevy, that's all. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to fuck you. I wanted to eat you. I wanted to eat your pee. I wanted to suck your C up between my teeth. Yum, yum, Bevy. Oh, yummy in my tummy. I wanted to put you in the cage and get the oven hot and feel your C, your plump C. And when it was plump enough to eat. Screaming, she grasped the sticky doorknob and bolted out onto the porch that was decorated with praline doodads and floored with fudge. Far away, dim, seeming to swim in her vision, she saw cars passing back and forth, and a woman pushing a cart full of groceries back from Costello's. I have to get out of here, she thought, just barely coherent. That's reality out there. If I can only get out onto the sidewalk. Won't do you any good to run, Bevy, my father, told her, laughing. We've waited a long time for this. This is going to be fun. This is going to be yummy in our tummies. Icky part's over now. Woohoo! She looked back again, and now her dead father was not wearing the witch's black dress, but the clown's suit with the big orange buttons. There was a 1958-style coonskin cap. Oh my gosh. The kind popularized by Fess Parker in the Disney movie about Davy Crockett, perched on its head. In one hand, it held a bunch of balloons. In the other, it held a leg of a child like a chicken drumstick. Written on each balloon was the legend, "It came from outer space." I want a t-shirt with that. How many times have I said I want a t-shirt with that in these readings? I think it's a lot. Tell your friends I am the last of a dying race, it said, grinning its sunken grin as it staggered and lurched down the porch steps after her. The only survivor of a dying planet. I've come to rob all the women, rape all the men, and learn to do the peppermint twist. I want to mark that part. Okay, I'm ready. Wait. Perfect. It began to do a mad shuck and jive, balloons in one hand, severed bleeding leg in the other. The clown costume writhed and flapped, but Beverly felt no wind. Her legs tangled in each other, and she spilled to the pavement, throwing out her palms to take up the shock, which all went to her shoulders. The woman pushing the grocery cart paused and looked back doubtfully, then hurried on a little faster. The clown came toward her again, casting the severed leg aside. It landed on the lawn in an undescribable thud. Beverly only lay sprawled on the pavement for a moment, sure somewhere inside that she must wake up soon. This couldn't be real. It had to be a dream. She realized that wasn't true a moment before the clown's crooked claw. She realized that wasn't true a moment before the clown's crooked long clawed fingers touched her. It was real. It could kill her, as it had killed the children. The Grackles know your real name, she screamed at it suddenly. It recoiled, and it seemed to her that for a moment The grin on its lips became a great red grin. Wait, I'm so confused. What's happening? Okay. It recoiled, and it seemed to her that for a moment the grin on the lips inside the great red grin that had been painted on and around them became a grimace of hate and pain, and perhaps of fear as well. It might only have been her imagination. She certainly had no idea why she had said such a crazy thing, but it bought her an instant of time. She was on her feet and running. Brake squealed in a hoarse voice, both mad and scared, yelled, "Why don't you look where you're going, you dumb—" I don't know what that word is, but I feel like I shouldn't say it. It goes Quiff. I feel like I shouldn't say that. Anyways, she had a blurred impression of the bakery truck that had almost hit her when she bolted into the street like a child after a rubber ball. And then she was standing on the opposite sidewalk, panting, a hot stitch in her left side. The bakery truck went on down Lower Main. The clown was gone, the leg was gone, the house still stood there, but she saw now that it was crumbling and deserted. The windows boarded up, the steps leading up to the porch cracked and broken. Was I really in there? Did I dream it all? But her jeans were dirty, her yellow blouse smeared with dust, and there was chocolate on her fingers. She rubbed them on the legs of her jeans and walked away fast, her face hot, her back cold as ice, her eyeballs seeming to pulse in and out with the rapid thud of her heart. We can't beat it. Whatever it is, we can't beat it. It even wants us to try. It wants to settle the old score. Can't be happy with the draw, I guess. We ought to get out of here. Just leave. Something brushed against her calf, light as a cat's questioning paw. She jerked away from it with a little shriek. She looked down and cringed, one hand against her mouth. It was a balloon, as yellow as her blouse. Written on the side of it, in electric blue, were the words, "That's White Wabbit." As she watched, it went bouncing lightly up the street, urged by the pleasant late spring breeze. I also want that on a shirt. I want a bright yellow shirt that says, "That's White Wabbit." Wouldn't that be funny? Okay, anyways. I'm going to drink some water before I move on to the next section, because, man, that hurt my head. The Pennywise scenes are fun to read, but they're so fast-paced when I read them. That's just like, whoa. I feel like I want to turn off my light, my big light, because that lamp is going directly to my face. I'm going to turn it off and see if that makes my eyes better. I'll BRB. Get a snack. Stay a while. That did nothing. It's still bright over here. What if I moved it down a bit? What is that? That's spooky. I don't know if it's spooky. My eyes hurt. And I've eyeshadow on. I should have washed my face before I did this. Okay. We have how many more pages? Oh, I need to stop yawning. We have 20 more pages. We can do it. We can do it. Yeah. Oh, I saw a bad word. Ooh. Oh, this is the Richie being racist scene, isn't it? Okay. Good for Richie. Okay. I'm going to drink my apple juice for just a second. Okay, let's go. 4. Richie Tozier makes tracks. Well, there was the day Henry and his friends chased me. Before the end of school, Richie was walking along Outer Canal Street, past Bassey Park. Now he stopped, hands stuffed in his pockets, looking toward the kissing bridge, but not really seeing it. I got away from them in the toy department of freezies. Since the mad conclusion of the reunion lunch, he had been walking aimlessly, trying to make his peace with the awful things which had been in the fortune cookies, or the things which had seemed to be in the cookies. He thought that most likely nothing at all had come out of them. It had been a group hallucination brought on by the spooky shit that they had been talking about. The best proof of the hypothesis was that Rose had seen nothing at all. Of course, Beverly's parents had never seen any of the blood that came out of the bathroom drain either, but that wasn't the same. No, why not? Because we're grown-ups now, he muttered, and discovered the thought had absolutely no power or logic at all. Might as well have been a nonsense line from a kid's skip rope chant. He started to walk again. I went up by city center and sat down on a park bench for a while, and I thought I saw. He stopped again, frowning. Saw what? But that was just something I dreamed. Was it? Was it really? He looked to the left and saw the big glass brick and steel building that had been so modern in the late 50s and now looked rather antique and tacky. And here I am, he thought, right back to fucking city center, scene of that other hallucination, or dream, or whatever it was. The other saw him whoa. These are with K's. The other saw him as the class clown, or the crazy the crazy cut up, and he had fallen neatly and easily into that role again. We all fell neatly and easily back into old roles again, didn't you notice? But was there anything very unusual about this? You thought you would probably see the same thing at any 10th or 20th high school reunion, the class comedian who discovered a vocation for the priesthood in college would. What? Oh. What? The class comedian who had discovered a vocation for the priesthood in college would. Oh, would, after 2 drinks, revert almost automatically to the wiseacre he had been. The great English brain who had wound up with a GM truck dealership would suddenly begin spouting off about John Irving or John Cheever, the guy who had played with the Moondogs on Saturday nights and who had gone on to become a mathematics professor at Cornell, would suddenly find himself on stage with the band, a Fender guitar strapped over his shoulder, whipping out Gloria or Surfing Bird with gleeful, drunken ferocity. What was it Springsteen said? No retreat, baby, no surrender. But it was easier to believe in the oldies on the record player after a couple of drinks and some pretty good Panama Red. But Richie believed it was the reversion that was the hallucination, not the present life. Maybe the child was the father of the man. But fathers and sons often shared very different interests and only a passing resemblance. But you say grown-ups, and now it sounds like nonsense. It sounds like so much bibble-babble. Why is that, Richie? Why? Because Darius is weird as ever. Why don't we just leave it at that? Because things weren't that simple. That was why. I don't know if I'm just stupid right now, if I just can't think straight right now, but I don't know what's going on. My head hurts. This doesn't make sense to me. It also feels like Richie is talking to the narrator. As a kid, he had been a goof-off, a sometimes vulgar, sometimes amusing comedian, but it was the one way to get along without getting killed by kids like Henry Bowers or going absolutely Looney Tunes with boredom and loneliness. He realized now that a lot of the problem had been his own mind, which is usually moving at a speed 10 or 20 times that of his classmates. He had thought him strange, weird, or even suicidal, depending on the escapade in question. Oh, that's interesting. But maybe it had been a simple case of mental overdrive, if anything about being in constant mental overdrive was simple. Anyway, it was the sort of thing you got under control after a while. You got it under control or you found outlets for it. Guys like Kinky Briefcase or Buford Kiss Drivel, for instance. Richie had discovered that in the months after he had wandered into the college radio station, pretty much on a whim, and had discovered everything he'd ever wanted during his first week behind the microphone. He hadn't been very good at first. He had been too excited to be good. But he had understood his potential not to be just good at the job, but great at it. And just that knowledge had been enough to put him over the moon in a cloud of euphoria. At the same time, he had begun to understand the great principle that moved the universe. At least that part of the universe which had to do with careers and success. You found the crazy guy who was running around inside of you, fucking up your life. You chased him into the corner and grabbed him. You didn't kill him. Oh no, killing was too good for the likes of that little bastard. You put a harness over his head and then started plowing. The crazy guy worked like a demon once you had him in the traces, and he supplied it with a few chunks from time to time. That was really all there was, and that was enough. He had been funny, all right, a laugh a minute, but in the end, he had outgrown the nightmares that were on the dark side of all those laughs, or he thought he had, until today when the word grown-up suddenly stopped making sense to his own ears. And now here was something else to cope with, or at least think about. Here was the huge and totally idiotic statue of Paul Bunyan in front of City Center. I must be the exception that proves the rule, Big Bill. Are you sure there is nothing, Richie? Nothing at all. Up by City Center, I thought I saw sharp pain needled at his eyes for the second time that day, and he clutched at them, a startled moan coming out of him. Then it was gone again as quickly as it had come. I want to know what Richie's connection with his eyes are. Richie's eyes hurt at least twice, because it happened earlier too. What is it? And he's like afraid of eyes? I don't know. I'm confused by it. My being's weird. Okay. But he had also smelled something, hadn't he? Something that wasn't really there, but something that had been there. Something that made him think of, right here with you, Richie. Hold my hand. You can hold my hand. Can you catch hold my Canlin? It was smoke that had made his eyes sting and water. 27 years ago, they had breathed that smoke. In the end, there had just been Mike and himself left, and they had seen, but it was gone. He took a step closer to the plastic Paul Bunyan statue, as amazed by its cheerful vulgarity now as he had been overwhelmed by its size as a child. The mythical Paul stood 20 feet high, and its base added another 6 feet. He stood smiling down at the car and pedestrian traffic on Outer Canal Street from the edge of the city center lawn. City Center had been erected in the years 1954 through 55 for a minor league baseball team that never materialized. The Derry City Council had voted money for the statue a year later, in 1956. It had been hotly debated both in the council's public meetings and in the letters to the editor columns of the Derry News. Many thought it would be a perfectly lovely statue, certain to become a tourist attraction of note. There were others who found the idea of a plastic Paul Bunyan horrible, garish, and unbelievably gauche. The art teacher at Derry High School, Richard remembered, had written a letter to the News saying that it would be a monstrosity that if such a monstrosity were actually to be erected in Derry, she would blow it up. Whoa. Grinning, Richie wondered if that babe's contract had been renewed. Controversy, which Richie recognized now as an utterly typical big-town, small-city tempest in a teapot, had raged for 6 months, and of course it had been entirely meaningless. The statue had been purchased, and even if the city council had done something as aberrant, especially for New England, as deciding not to use an item for which money had been paid, where in God's name could it have been stored? Then the statue, not really sculpted at all, but simply cast in some Ohio plastics plant, had been set in place, still shrouded by a whack of canvas big enough to serve as a clipper ship sail. It had been unveiled on May 13th, 1957. Is that true? Was the Paul Bunyan statue thing really unveiled on March 13th, 1957, or did he make it up? Which was the Incorporated Township's 150th birthday. One faction gave voice to predictable moans of outrage, the other to equally predictable moans of rapture. When Paul was revealed that day, he was wearing his bib overalls and a red and white checkered shirt. His beard was splendidly black, splendidly full, splendidly lumberjacky. This is stupid. I don't want to read about Paul Bunyan, honestly. I don't want to. A plastic axe, surely the Godzilla of all plastic axes, was slung over one shoulder, and he grinned unceasingly at the northern skies, which on the day of the unveiling had been as blue as the skin of Paul's reputed companion. Babe was not present at the unveiling, however. The cost estimate of adding a blue ox to the tableau had been prohibited. Oh yeah, Babe isn't there. The ox isn't there. Interesting. They never did that? They haven't gotten the money yet? Okay. It's been, what? Math. 5. It's been nearly 70 years. The children who attended the ceremonies, there were hundreds of them, and 10-year-old Richie Tozier, in the company of his dad, had been among them, were totally and uncritically delighted by the plastic giant. Parents boosted toddlers up onto the square pedestal on which Paul stood, took photos, and watched with mixed apprehension and amusement as the kids climbed and crawled, laughing over Paul's huge black boots. Huge black plastic boots. He was narrating right now. This is like comedy, except for the Paul Bunny and stuff. It had been March of the following year when Richie, exhausted and terrified, had finished up on one of the benches in front of the statue after looting by the barest of margins Messrs. Messrs. That's not a word. Bowers, Chris, and Huggins in a chase that had led from Derry Elementary School across most of the downtown area. He had finally ditched them in the toy department of Freeze's department store. The Derry branch of Freeze's was Freezy's? I don't remember. Was a poor thing compared with the grand downtown department store in Bangor. But Richie had been far past caring about such things. By then it was a case of any port in a storm. Henry Bowers had been right behind him, and by then Richie had been flagging with an L, flagging, okay? He had been flagging badly. He had dodged at the mouth of the department store's revolving door as a last resort. Henry, who apparently didn't understand the physics of such devices, had nearly lost the tips of his fingers trying to grab Richie, as Richie trundled around and into the store. My lighting is off now, okay. Pelting downstairs, Short Tail flying up behind him, he had heard the revolving door give off a series of reports almost as loud as TV gunfire, and understood that Larry, Moe, and Curly were still after him. He was laughing as he went down the stairs to the basement level, but that was only a nervous tick. He was full of terror as a rabbit caught in a wire snare. They really meant to beat him up good this time. He had no idea that in another 10 weeks or so he would believe the three of them, Henry in particular, capable of anything short of murder. He surely would have widened with shock if he had known of the apocalyptic rock fight in July, when even that last qualification would disappear from his mind. And the whole thing had been so utterly, typically stupid. Richie and the other boys in his 5th grade class had been filing into the gym. A 6th grade class, Henry hulking among them like an ox among cows, had been coming out. Although he was still in the 5th grade, Henry went to gym with the older boys. The overhead pipes had been dripping again, and Mr. Fazio hadn't yet gone around putting up his "Caution, wet floor" sign on its little easel. Henry had slipped in a puddle and had landed on his keister. Before he could stop it, Richie's traitor mouth had bugled. "Way to go, Banana Heels!" There had been an explosion of laughter from both Henry's classmates and Richie's, but there had been no laughter on Henry's face as he picked himself up. "Way to go, Banana Heels!" Only a dull flash the color of freshly fired brick. Later for you, Four Eyes," he said and walked on. The laughter died at once. The boys in the hall looked at Richie as one already dead. Henry did not pause to check reactions. He simply walked off, head down, elbows red from catching the fall, a large wet place on the seat of his pants. Looking at the wet spot, Richie felt his suicidally witty mouth drop open again, but this time he snapped it shut again, so fast he almost amputated the tip of his tongue with the falling gate of his teeth. "Well, but he'll forget," he told himself uneasily as he changed up for gym. "Sure he will. Old Hank just hasn't got that many memory circuits working. Every time he takes a shit, he probably has to look up the directions to the... Oh my gosh. Let me try this again. Old Hank just hasn't got that many memory circuits working. Every time he takes a shit, he probably has to look up the directions in the instructions booklet. Ha ha. Ha ha. You're dead, trash mouth, Vince Boogers Taliendo told him, pulling his jock up over a dork roughly the size of in shape of an anemic peanut. Oh my god, that's so vivid. The size and shape of an anemic peanut. He said it with a certain sad respect. "Don't worry, though. Flowers. Cut off your ears and bring cauliflowers." Richie had come back smartly, and everyone laughed. Even old Boogers Taliendo laughed. Why not? They could all afford to laugh. What? Me worry. They would all be home watching Jimmy Dode, and the Mouseketeers on the Mickey Mouse Club, or Frankie Lyman singing "I'm Not a Juvenile Delinquent" on American Bandstand, while Richie went shagging ass through ladies' lingerie and housewares on his way to the toy department, with sweat pouring down his back into the crack of his ass, and his terrified balls strung up so high they felt like they might be hung over his belly button. Sure, they could laugh. Hardy har har har. Henry hadn't forgotten. Richie had left by the door at the kindergarten end of the school building, just in case, but Henry had stuck Belch Huggins there also just in case. Hardy har har har. Richie saw Belch first, or there would have been no contest at all. Belch was looking out toward Dairy Park, holding an unlit cigarette in one hand, dreamily picking the seed of his chinos out of his ass with the other. Heart pounding hard, Richie had walked quietly across the playground. It was almost the way down Charter Street before Belch turned his head and saw him. He yelled for Henry and Victor, and since then the chase had been on. When Richie reached the toy department, it had been utterly, horribly deserted. There wasn't even a sales clerk hanging out. A welcome adult to put a stop to things before they got entirely out of hand. He could hear the 3 dinosaurs of the apocalypse closing in now, and he simply couldn't run anymore. Each breath produced a deep, hurting stitch in his left side. Oh, I'm sorry. It's also weird. I read on Saturday nights, and on Saturdays I work at 8:30 in the morning. Isn't the best, but I do it anyways. His eyes fixed on the door, which read, "Emergency exit only. Alarm will sound." Hope kindled in his chest. Richie ran down an aisle crammed with Donald Duck jack-in-the-boxes, United States Army tanks made in Japan, Lone Ranger cap pistols, wind-up robots. He reached the door and slammed the push bar as hard as he could. The door opened, letting in cool mid-March air. The alarm went off with a strident bray. Richie immediately doubled back and dropped to his hands and knees in the next aisle over. He was down before the door could settle closed again. Henry, Belch, and Victor thundered into the toy department just as the door clicked shut and the alarm cut off. They raced for it, Henry in the lead, his face set in intent. A sales clerk finally appeared, coming on the run. He wore a blue nylon duster over a plaid sport coat, of excruciating ugliness. The rims of his spectacles were as pink as the eyes of a white rabbit. Richie thought he looked like Wally Cox in his Mr. Pepper's role. He had to slam his traitor mouth into the fat part of his forearm to keep from screaming out gales of exhausted laughter. "You boys," Mr. Peepers exclaimed. "You boys can't go out there. That's an emergency exit. Hey, you boys! You boys!" Victor glanced at him a little nervously, but Henry and Belch never turned from their course, and Victor followed them. The alarm brayed again, longer this time, as they charged into the alley. Before it stopped clanging, Richie was on his feet and trotting back toward the ladies' lingerie. "You boys will be barred from the store!" the clerk yelled after him. Looking back over his shoulder, Richie squealed in his granny grunt voice, "Did anyone ever tell you you look just like Mr. Peepers, young man?" And so he had escaped. And so he had finished up almost a mile from Freeze's, in front of City Center. And he devotedly hoped, out of harm's way, at least for the time being. He was spent. He sat down on a bench just to the left of the Paul Bunyan statue, wanting only a little peace while he got himself back together. In a bit, he would get up and head home, but for now, it felt too good to just sit here in the afternoon sun. The day had opened in a cold, drizzly gloom, but now he could believe spring might actually be on the way. Further up the lawn, he could see the city center marquee, which on that March day bore this message in large blue translucent letters. "Hey teens! Coming March 28th, the Arnie Woo Ginsberg Rock and Roll Show. Jerry Lee Lewis, the Penguins, Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers. Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps, Freddie Boom Boom Cannon. An evening of wholesome entertainment." That was a show Richie really wanted to see, but he knew there wasn't a chance. His mother's idea of wholesome entertainment did not include Jerry Lee Lewis telling the people of America, "We got chicken in the barn. Whose barn? What barn? My barn." Nor, for that matter, did it include Freddie Cannon, whose Tallahassee Lassie had a hi-fi chassis. What? Oh my gosh. Whose Tallahassee Lassie had a hi-fi chassis? She was willing to admit that she had done her share of screaming for Frank Sinatra, whom she was calling Frankie the Snoot, as a bobby soxer. But like Bill Denborough's mother, she was death on rock and roll. Chuck Berry terrified her, and she declared that Richard Penniman, better known to his teen and sub-teen constituency as Little Richard, made her want to barf like a chicken. This was a phrase for which Richie had never asked a translation. His dad was neutral on the subject of rock and roll and could perhaps have been swayed, but Richie knew in his heart that his mother's wishes would rule on the subject, until he was 16 or 17 anyway, and by then his mother was firmly convinced the country's rock and roll mania would have passed. Richie thought Danny and the Juniors were more right on that subject than his mom. Rock and roll would never die. He himself loved it, although his sources were really only two: American Bandstand on Channel 7 in the afternoon and WMEX out of Boston at night, when the air had thinned and the hoarse, enthusiastic voice of Arnie Ginsberg came wavering in and out like the voice of a ghost called up at a seance. The beat did more than make him happy. It made him feel bigger, stronger, more there. When Frankie Ford sang "See Cruz" or Eddie Cochran. That's so similar to Eddie Cochran. That literally is Eddie Cochran. Like the kid who died. Sang "Summertime Blues." Richie was actually transported with joy. He couldn't have picked a different person or a different name for his made-up character. There was power in that music, a power which seemed to most rightfully belong to all the skinny kids, fat kids, ugly kids, shy kids, the world's losers, in short. In it he felt mad, hilarious voltage, which had the power to both kill and exalt. Sorry, I'm so tired. He idolized Fats Domino, who made Ben Hanscom look slim and trim, and Buddy Holly, who, like Richie, wore glasses, and screaming Jay Hawkins, who popped out of a coffin at his concerts, or so Richie had been told, and the Devils, who danced as good as black guys. Well, almost. He would have his rock and roll someday if he wanted it. He was confident it would still be there for him when his mother finally gave in and let him have it. But that would not be on March 28th, 1958, or 1959, or... His eyes had drifted away from the marquee. Then he must have fallen asleep. It was the only explanation that made sense. What had happened next could only happen in dreams. And now here he was again, a Richie Tozier who had finally gotten all the rock and roll he ever wanted, and who had found happily that it still wasn't enough. His eyes went to the marquee in front of the city center and saw, with a hideous kind of serendipity, those same blue letters spelled out, June 14th, Heavy Metal Mania, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden. Buy your tickets here at any Ticketron outlet. What's this? The switch of an Iron Maiden? What's this? The switch of an Iron Maiden? That was in chapter 2. Remember in the clubhouse? And what's this? The switch of an Iron Maiden? Somewhere along the way, they dropped the wholesome entertainment line, but as far as I can tell, that's just about the only difference, Richie thought. And heard Danny and the Juniors dim and distant, like voices heard down a long corridor coming out of a cheap radio. Rock and roll will never die. I'll dig it to the end. It'll go down in history. Just watch, my friend. This is gonna be rough. There's still, how many pages left? 10 pages left. Buckle up, Girl Scouts. I'm gonna have another jelly bean. Can I do that? Maybe that'll make me read better. Having a jelly bean. Okay. Richie looked back at Paul Bunyan, a patron saint of Derry. Derry, which had become, oh my gosh! Derry, which had come into being according to the stories because this was where the logs fetched up when they came downriver. There had been a time where, in the spring, both the Penobscot and the Kenduskeag would have been solid logs from one side to the other, their black bark hides glistening in the spring sun. A fellow who was fast on his feet could walk from Wally's Spa and Hell's Half Acre over to Rampers and Brewster. Rampers was a tavern of such horrible repute that it was commonly called the Bucket of Blood, without getting his boots wet over the third crossing of his rawhide laces. Or so it had been stored in Richie's youth, and he supposed there was a bit of Paul Bunyan in all such stories. Old Paul, he thought, looking up at the plastic statue. What have you been doing since I've been gone? Made any new riverbeds coming home, tired and dragging your axe behind you? Hit any new lakes on account of wanting a bathtub big enough so you could sit in water up to your neck? Scared any more little kids that way you scared me that day? Ah, and suddenly he remembered it all, the way you will suddenly remember a word that has been dancing on the tip of your tongue. There he had been, sitting in that mellow March sunshine, drowsing a little, thinking about going home and catching the last half-hour bandstand. And suddenly there had been a warm swash of air into his forehead. It blew his hair back into his face. It blew his hair back from his forehead. He looked up, and Paul Bunyan's huge plastic face had been right in front of his, bigger than a face on a movie screen, filling everything. The rush of air had caused by Paul Bunyan's bending down, although he did not precisely look like Paul anymore. The forehead was now low and beetling. Tufts of wiry hair poked from a nose as red as the nose of a long-time drunkard. His eyes were bloodshot, and one had a slight cast to it. I need to sneeze. The axe was no longer on his shoulder. Paul was leaning on its haft. In chapter 2, he has an ice pick. In the Paul Bunyan statue in chapter 2, he has an ice pick, not an axe. What does he have in real life? I think it's an axe. I don't remember. I haven't paid much attention to the Paul Bunyan statue. Okay. Paul was leaning on its haft, and the blunt end of its head had crushed a trench in the concrete of the sidewalk. You know what? How long is the next thing we have to read? 15 to... Oh, no, not 15. No, not 15. It is 01 to 21. Okay, you know what? Why don't we stop here? Honestly, I'm not doing too hot on the reading scale of things. And so next time we would read 30-something pages. How does that sound? Let's just stop in the middle of a sentence. That good? Is that good for you two watching here now? That's good for people that are going to watch this later? I'm going to stop here because it's not going well. It is my first time reading after a month. I'm sorry that it has taken a month. I've been really busy and unmotivated to do anything. Last weekend I was totally free to read, and I just was laying in my bed not reading because I was not wanting to read. But I'm back now, and we're going to read this book and hopefully finish it because we're only halfway through. And we started it in September? And it's taken 7 months so far. So hopefully we'll finish by the time I go to college. We'll see. For now, though, let's peace out for the night, for the day, for the morning, whenever you are watching this. It's night for me. It's 11 p.m. for me. So, yeah. Thank you for coming back. I haven't done this in a while, and I'm glad that some people are still watching, still reading. It's still a cool book. Even though I hate Stephen King's writing sometimes, it is still a cool book. So, still a cool book. Cool book, Stephen. Minus those few parts. You could have fixed that up. Also, you could have fixed up the entire thing. It's too much sometimes. That's fine, though. I'm not an author. I can't really berate Stephen King for his choices. It's his book, not mine. Alright, well, anyways, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to go to bed. Good night, good morning, have a great day, stay safe out there. Don't get eaten by a killer clown, don't talk to any old ladies. Yeah, bye.